She was delivering lunch when she bumped into a stranger. He wasn't just hungry, he was the owner of the company. "I walked 2 miles in the rain to deliver your lunch and now you say you don't want it?" Susan's voice cracked with exhaustion and frustration as she clutched her phone tightly, weaving through the revolving door of a tall corporate building. Her blonde hair clung to her face, soaked by the relentless drizzle, her delivery bag dripping and heavy on her shoulder. She barely had time to register the voice on the other end when, thud, the impact came suddenly. Her shoulder slammed into someone solid, her foot slipped, and the next moment 2 lunchboxes flew from her arms. One landed with a soft thump, slightly dented, but the other splattered across the marble lobby floor. "Oh no, I am so sorry," she gasped, immediately crouching down, her fingers trembling as she tried to gather the broken container and scattered food. Her voice faltered. "I didn't see. I wasn't watching." "It's okay," came a calm, warm voice from above. Susan looked up to see a tall man standing drenched in the doorway. His dark dress shirt clung to his lean frame, soaked from the rain. Drops of water dripped from his collarbone to his wrist, but there was no irritation in his eyes, just curiosity, and something gentler, compassion. "I will pay for both boxes," he said, kneeling beside her without hesitation. "But, if you don't mind, maybe we could share one?" Susan blinked, confused for a moment. "The one that is still intact," he added, holding up the slightly dented container with a lopsided smile. Susan hesitated, then gave a small nod. Minutes later, they were seated on the wide stone steps behind the building, sheltered just enough from the drizzle to avoid getting soaked. Liam handed her half the meal and kept the other half for himself. They ate in silence, the soft patter of rain creating a strange, comforting rhythm. "People usually just yell," Susan said finally, her voice low. "When something goes wrong, I mean." "You didn't," Liam shrugged, chewing quietly. Getting angry never made anyone less hungry. That made her laugh, just a little. It was the kind of laugh that had not come easily for her in a long time, tired but real. She looked down at her hands, damp and shaking from both cold and emotion. Without a word, Liam reached into his coat pocket and took out a neatly folded napkin. He gently wrapped it around her hand, patting away the moisture with deliberate care. Susan froze. Then he said, so softly it barely rose above the sound of the rain, "These hands, they were meant to hold a pencil, or maybe a paintbrush, not thermal delivery bags." Susan swallowed hard. No one had ever said something like that to her, not even when she had been a student, before life had unraveled, before tuition notices had piled up, before she became the girl rushing lunches through rainstorms just to get by. Her voice caught in her throat. How did you know?" Liam looked at her, his expression unreadable at first. Then it softened. "I did not, but I saw the way you handled that broken box, like it deserved a second chance. That kind of gentleness, it usually comes from someone who once created something delicate." The air between them grew still. Rain tapped gently on the metal railing beside them, on the concrete underfoot. Susan could not remember the last time someone saw her, not just the surface, the girl with tangled hair and a delivery badge, but her, the version long buried under bills, regrets, and cold city streets. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world around them faded. No deadlines, no canceled orders, no thunder in the distance. Just the quiet gaze of a man who saw beyond what was broken, and a woman who, maybe for the first time in years, dared to believe that she was still worth being seen. Susan's fingers closed gently around the napkin in her hand, holding onto the moment like it might disappear with the next breath. He smiled, not with his mouth, but with something deeper in his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, though she was not sure if she meant the lunch or the kindness. He nodded once. "Any time." And just like that, they finished the meal in silence, strangers bound by something more than a rainy afternoon, a shared stillness, a kindness unspoken, a beginning neither of them saw coming, Susan unlocked the door to her apartment with a tired sigh. The small unit sat on the third floor of a worn brick building, its hallway lights flickering like they had given up trying to stay bright. Inside, the living room was tidy but modest. Hand-me-down furniture, a small electric heater buzzing in the corner, and textbooks stacked next to the couch. "Hey, I'm home," she called softly. From the couch, a young voice answered, hoarse but cheerful. "Hey, Suze, did you make $1 million today?" Susan smiled. Her little brother, Alex, lay under a faded blanket, a thermometer beside him and a bottle of cold medicine on the coffee table. At 13, he had the spirit of someone twice his age and the immune system of someone half his strength. "No millions today," she said, walking over and gently brushing the hair from his forehead. "But I did bring back some rice and grilled chicken. You up for a few bites later?" "Only if there's sauce," he mumbled with a smirk. She ruffled his hair before heading to the kitchenette, setting down her delivery bag and the remaining container. Her shoulders ached. Her shoes were still wet, but strangely her heart felt different. After checking Alex's fever, lower now, thankfully, she settled into the chair by the window. Outside, the city glowed with its usual cold indifference. Neon lights blinked, sirens echoed somewhere far off, and raindrops raced each other down the glass. She unzipped the outer pocket of her bag to pull out a damp towel, and there it was, a folded piece of paper she had not noticed before. Curious, Susan opened it. The handwriting was clean, confident, and yet strangely gentle. "You deserve better things." Nope. No phone number, no name, no explanation, just that. She stared at the words, blinking as if they might rearrange themselves into something more. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, without realizing it, she smiled, a quiet, trembling smile. Her eyes welled up. No one had said anything like that to her in years. She leaned back in the chair, holding the note in both hands like it might float away. Her fingers brushed over the ink as if trying to memorize the texture, the curve of each letter, the intent behind them. Her mind drifted backward, before all of this, before the delivery job, before the broken-down car, before hospital bills and eviction notices. Back to a studio classroom filled with drafting tables and vision boards. Back to when she was a second-year architecture student at a state university, top of her class, winner of a regional design competition. Her professor once said her sense of space was instinctive, like she could hear what a building wanted to be. Then, in a matter of months, her parents were gone. Car accident, no savings, no insurance. Just her and Alex, and an endless stack of responsibilities. She had dropped out by the end of the semester. No time, no money, no choice. Since then, life had been survival. Susan folded the note and pressed it against her heart, letting herself breathe. Not in gasps or gulps, just breathe. Was it a miracle, a coincidence, a fluke? She did not believe in fairy tales anymore. But today, just today, something felt different. Maybe it was the way the man's voice stayed calm when the food spilled, or the way he wiped her hand without making it feel like pity. Or maybe it was this scrap of paper that felt heavier than anything else she had carried home all week. She got up quietly, walked to her bookshelf, and slipped the note between 2 pages of an old architecture textbook. The spine was cracked, the edges worn, but she had never gotten rid of it. "I'm going to bed," she whispered to herself. Tomorrow is another delivery day, but as she turned off the lights and tucked the blanket over Alex, something in her chest felt warmer, lighter, as if, just maybe, somewhere in this vast, uncaring city, someone had seen her. Not just the girl running lunch in the rain, but her. And that, somehow, made all the difference. Liam Hayes stared out the rain-streaked window of his corner office, the city below glowing with artificial light and blurred reflections. From this height, people looked like ants, scurrying through lives they probably never questioned, never paused to ask themselves why they did what they did. He used to be one of them. The rain had soaked his shirt earlier, but he had not minded. In fact, he had not minded much lately, until that girl. the one with blonde hair plastered to her cheeks, apologizing over a spilled lunchbox like it was the end of the world. Susan. He had not meant to linger. He was supposed to leave that building hours earlier after inspecting a site personally, one of the rare things he still enjoyed about the company he had built. But the rain slowed him down. Or maybe something else had. Something made him stop when she crashed into him. She had looked like someone who was holding together too many pieces of something fragile and doing it with hands that should have been creating, not surviving. Liam turned away from the window and sat at his desk. The silence in his office was thick. No assistant hovering, no board member calls, just him and his thoughts. He opened his laptop and typed a name, Susan Carter. He hesitated for a second before hitting enter. It felt intrusive, but something in her eyes had stuck with him, something painfully familiar. And in a world where so many people faked credentials, masked their motives, or played roles for success, this girl had shown something real, something raw. It had rattled him more than he liked to admit. The search results loaded. Architecture major, full scholarship, second-year dropout, but before that, top scores in her program. Regional Design Award, a feature in a university magazine, complete with a photo. Susan, hair pulled back, standing proudly beside a scale model of a community center she had designed for underserved neighborhoods. She was radiant in that photo, confident, whole. Liam clicked through more records, transcripts, design submissions, professor reviews, words like visionary, natural sense of spatial empathy, gifted communicator, repeated more than once. And then, silence. No activity after that semester. Just a name disappearing from the system. Liam leaned back, a strange ache forming in his chest. He remembered what that felt like, the world shifting under your feet, people you trusted turning away. He had gone through something similar, rising out of poverty, clawing his way into the architecture world, only to have his co-founder, the woman he loved, sell out half the company for a buyout he never approved. Trust had never returned after that. He had built his empire from the ashes, yes, but he had also built walls, until a girl in a soggy delivery jacket broke right through them. He opened the magazine image again. Susan stood tall in that photo, beaming at something she believed in. Then he pictured her earlier that day, kneeling on the floor, hands shaking, cheeks wet, apologizing for a ruined lunch, as if it were her fault that the world was unkind. He whispered to himself, almost unconsciously, "You are still that girl, even if you are wearing a delivery bag." He closed the file slowly, fingers hovering above the keyboard for a moment longer. Then he picked up his phone. "Chloe," he said when his assistant answered, "I want to offer a new internship. Quietly. No press, no board involvement. Use an internal ID." "Understood," she said without question. "Name?" He looked out the window once more. The rain had begun to slow, tapering into a mist. "Susan Carter." He ended the call and exhaled. This was not about charity. It was about recognizing something valuable in a world that often discarded the overlooked. He had forgotten, somewhere along the way, why he had started this company. Not to build skyscrapers or chase investors, but to build what mattered, spaces that changed lives. Spaces that made people feel safe, seen, and inspired, she reminded him. And maybe it was time he remembered who he was, too. Susan stared at her phone screen, blinking in confusion. The email had no header, no HR introduction, just a brief message from an internal company address. "You've been selected for a short-term internship with our concept design team. Start date Monday. Location, Level 5, Hayes and Brook Architectural Group." She had never applied there. In fact, she had stopped applying altogether after too many silent rejections and automated declines. So why now? And why her? Still, something inside whispered, "Try." So she did. By Monday morning, Susan stood at the massive glass doors of the Hayes and Brook building, her palms sweaty, her reflection in the mirror-like surface making her feel small. But she walked in anyway because, small or not, she had earned at least a foot in the door. The team greeted her with polite smiles, a few handshakes, but the warmth did not go deeper. They were cordial, professional, and perfectly distant. A few names were offered: Marla from logistics, Theo from rendering, but they blurred together in her mind, the way unfamiliar faces do when no one really wants to remember yours. Susan took it all in stride. She showed up early, stayed late, took notes, asked questions when allowed, and when no one gave her answers, she figured things out on her own. By the end of the first week, her concepts were being pinned up beside the rest, not praised, not torn down, just quietly acknowledged. It was enough. But there were whispers. In the hallway she heard it, just a sliver of a sentence from two passing co-workers. Must be nice, having someone up top pulling strings. She's probably related to someone on the board. Susan felt her face flush. She kept her head down and pretended she had not heard. Later that afternoon, she stood frozen at the fourth-floor landing, the folder in her hand suddenly too heavy. Below her, the open atrium buzzed with designers, interns, assistants, all moving like parts of a machine she had not yet learned to fit into. And across the space, up above, she noticed him again, the man she had seen more than once this week. Always at the same time, always in the same place, the upper balcony overlooking the floor. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans, a shirt with sleeves rolled, not flashy, not polished, yet something about him felt commanding. He leaned against the railing, watching the team below, his gaze scanning. She caught herself wondering if he was security or maybe someone from operations. Their eyes met briefly. He looked at her with the quiet kind of interest that did not feel invasive, just present. Susan looked away quickly. That evening she stayed late, trying to perfect her 3D layout for a sustainable housing model. The office emptied out, lights dimmed, and she was finally alone. Or so she thought. In the restroom, she locked herself in a stall, sat on the lid of the toilet, and let herself cry. Quietly, quickly, because she did not have time to be fragile. But she could not shake the weight of being the outsider, the one everyone whispered about, the one who did not belong. Her phone buzzed, a text from Alex. Made dinner. You okay? She wiped her face and texted back, Fine, be home soon. When she stepped out into the hallway a few minutes later, someone was waiting, the man from the balcony. He did not speak at first, just stood there holding out a bottle of water. She blinked, confused. Water, he said simply, his voice calm. You looked like you needed it. She hesitated, then took it. As she unscrewed the cap, he added, Do not let them make you forget why you started. Susan stopped mid-sip. What? He looked at her, not with pity, but with something far more human. You know why you're here, he said. That is enough. She could not explain why her chest suddenly ached, or why her throat tightened again. Maybe it was the way he said it. Maybe it was because no one had told her something like that in a long, long time. He turned to leave without another word. Susan stood frozen, holding the water bottle, staring after him. Something about him, his presence, his calm, stayed with her long after he disappeared down the corridor. She could not name it, but it felt like the beginning of something she had not allowed herself to hope for. Something strange was happening. Susan first noticed it when she logged into the system Monday morning and found the exact rendering file she had spent the weekend trying to build, already there, already labeled, already halfway formatted for the next review stage. She paused, blinking at the screen. She had not uploaded that version yet. Her last draft was on a USB at home. But this one had her signature layout, style, even her usual shortcut color codes. She shook it off. Maybe she had saved it and forgotten. Sleep deprivation could explain a lot. But then it happened again. Mid-week, her laptop began lagging badly during a presentation test run. Before she could even file an IT request, a new device appeared at her station the next day. Same model, upgraded specs, a sticky note that simply read, "Keep going." She asked around. No one knew who had ordered the replacement. IT shrugged. Management shrugged. Theo, the systems guy, raised an eyebrow and said, "I thought it was you who requested it." The third time was the most surreal. Susan arrived late one Thursday morning, train delay, spilled coffee, frantic text from her brother, and realized she had left her main draft for a community park project at home. Her heart dropped. The review was in less than an hour, but when she reached her desk, the file was already printed, bound, and placed carefully on her table. Her name was written in blue pen on the cover, not typed, handwritten. It was not her handwriting, not Marla's, not Theo's. She knew because she had seen this handwriting before. Susan opened the drawer of her desk slowly and pulled out her wallet. She slipped a folded piece of paper from behind her ID, an old, slightly creased note. "You deserve better things. L." She held it side by side with the cover note. Same pen pressure. Same sharp upward tilt on the lowercase e. Same casual slant in the S of her name. Her chest tightened. She looked around the office. People moved like normal. Screens glowed, phones rang, but it all felt muffled now, distant. As if someone had reached through the noise and tapped her on the shoulder, not to distract her, but to remind her she was being seen. She stepped out onto the back balcony for air. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the two papers together, lining them up again and again, as if the truth would change if she blinked long enough. It was him. It had to be. The man from the rain, the man from the hallway, the one who said, "Don't let them make you forget why you started." She whispered it out loud, not even meaning to. "Is it you?" And then her heart did something it had not done in a long time. It raced. Not from fear, not from panic, but from the sudden surge of a realization so wild, so implausible, that it almost made her laugh. Why would someone like him, whoever he really was, do all this? Why the note, the laptop, the files? And more importantly, how did he know she needed those things before she even asked? She leaned against the railing, the wind catching strands of her hair as she stared out over the city. The rooftops stretched far and wide, covered in steel and concrete and ambition. But somewhere in that maze, someone had chosen to reach across the silence and help, without asking for credit, without asking for anything. Susan pressed the notes to her chest, her eyes damp but steady. The questions spun in her mind, but her heart had already whispered the answer. It was him. And if it was, then everything, the internship, the presents, the words, meant something more. He had not just opened a door for her. He had stood behind it, quietly, making sure she could walk through without tripping, and she needed to know why. The hallway outside the executive floor was quieter than the rest of the building, carpeted, spotless, intimidating. Susan stood outside the frosted glass door, her fingers clenched around the folded pieces of paper in her hand, the note from weeks ago and the handwritten label from the project file. Her heart pounded. She knocked once. "Come in," came the voice. She stepped into the room. Liam looked up from behind a sleek black desk, the skyline stretching out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. He wore the same simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, collar open. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. Not surprised, not panicked, just still. Susan walked to the middle of the room and laid the two pieces of paper on his desk without a word. He looked at them. Then he looked at her. "Yes," he said quietly. "They're from me." A long silence fell between them, thick with everything unspoken. Susan's voice cracked as she asked, "Why?" Liam stood slowly, walking around the desk, not too close, just enough to meet her at eye level. "Because I saw you," he said, "that day in the lobby. Not just someone who dropped a lunchbox. I saw someone trying, someone surviving when she should be creating." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "You should have told me." "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd think it was pity. Or worse, that I was playing some kind of game. Her voice rose. But it felt like a game. You watching from above, leaving notes like riddles, fixing things without telling me. That's not how real life works. I know, he said, stepping back slightly. And I'm sorry. She turned away, wiping at her cheek. Do you know what it's like to work this hard just to be taken seriously, and then realize someone's been pulling strings the whole time? I wasn't pulling strings, Liam said softly. I was removing obstacles. She laughed bitterly. Sounds the same from where I'm standing. He looked down, ashamed. When I started this company, he said, it was because I wanted to design spaces that mattered. Places that made people feel safe, inspired, like they belonged. But I lost that somewhere, got caught in the numbers, the investors, the boardrooms. He met her gaze again. Then I saw you, and I remembered what it felt like to fight for something, to believe in something. She didn't answer. Her silence pressed harder than any words. He took a breath, deeper this time. I had someone once, he said. We built this company together. She was brilliant, ambitious. I loved her, and one day she sold her half to a corporate group behind my back. For the right price, she walked away. Susan's expression softened, just slightly. That's why I stopped trusting resumes, Liam said. Stopped trusting charm. I only trust what people do when no one's watching. He stepped closer, but not too close. You didn't know I was watching, but I saw how you worked, how you helped that junior intern fix his layout, even though it wasn't your task, how you stayed late when no one asked, how you carried your brother's photo in your notebook. Susan's lips parted in surprise. How do you? He nodded toward her desk. You left it open once. I saw the drawing he made you, the one that says, Suze's future office. That broke something in her. The tears fell freely now, hot and fast, and she hated herself for letting them. I don't want charity, she whispered. It was never charity, Liam said. It was a chance. She stared at him, trying to find deception, ego, condescension, anything to hold on to her anger. But there was only honesty. And fear. He was scared too. Still, she shook her head, unable to speak. Her throat was too tight. Her legs moved on instinct as she turned and walked out of the office. Liam stood alone in the silence. He sat back down, opened his drawer, and pulled out a small black recorder, the kind he used to review internal presentations. He hit play. Susan's voice filled the room, shaky but strong. From the day she had pitched her first concept. I don't want to just build houses. I want to build hope. Liam closed his eyes and let the words echo through the room like the only truth that still mattered. Susan did not send an official resignation email. She simply stopped showing up. There were no exit interviews, no awkward goodbyes in the hallway. She gathered her things late one evening when the office was empty, left her access badge on the desk, and walked out without turning back. No one followed. The following week passed like a blur. Delivery shifts, grocery runs, checking in on Alex, trying to convince herself she had made the right choice, that she was protecting her dignity, that walking away was strength, not surrender. But the silence hurt more than she expected. There was no message from Liam, no apology, no explanation, just silence. Until the 7th day. That morning a package arrived at her apartment, no label, no return address. Just her name, handwritten in clean, slanted letters across the front. Susan stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a rolled set of design papers, blueprints, intricately detailed, professionally rendered. But it was not just any design. It was her design. The little house she had once described casually in the rain, when she and Liam had sat on the steps eating shared lunch. A tiny cabin near a lake, large windows to let in the morning light, a reading nook built into the wall, a garden outside for herbs and flowers, a small room with sky-colored walls, meant for Alex. She had drawn it once, long ago, in a notebook she had since lost. But here it was, perfected, real, and taped to the last page was a note, simple, in the same handwriting as before. You are not the girl who delivers lunch. You are the girl who made me believe again. L. Susan pressed her hand to her mouth as the first tears slipped down her cheek. She did not sob. There was no dramatic collapse to the floor, no soundtrack, just her, standing in the middle of her tiny apartment, holding a dream that someone else had remembered for her. The paper in her hand felt heavier than it should have, because it carried not just ink and measurements, but hope. Hope that someone saw her, really saw her, not as an assistant, not as a charity case, but as someone who still had something to give. She sank slowly onto the couch, clutching the note to her chest, the blueprints resting beside her. Tears streamed quietly down her face, but her heart was calm, quiet, open. It was not just about the drawing. It was about being remembered, being believed in. And suddenly she knew this story was not finished yet. Susan stood in front of the building she had once entered as a stranger, hands trembling, heart pounding. This time she walked through the doors without hesitation. The receptionist glanced up in surprise but said nothing. She took the elevator to the top floor, the button glowing under her finger like a small promise. There was a board meeting happening, she knew that, and she knew she should not be there. But none of that mattered now. The elevator doors opened. Liam stood at the head of a long glass conference table. Around him sat the company's top executives and shareholders. Charts were on the screen, graphs, reports. He was mid-sentence when the doors opened. People turned. He looked up. For a beat, time froze. Susan walked in, her steps quiet but steady. Liam's face changed. Not in shock, not in panic, but in something deeper. Something like home. He turned back to the room and said calmly, "There's something I need to say before we go any further." The room fell silent. I built this company because I believed we could create more than buildings. I believed we could create purpose. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that. He glanced at Susan. Then someone walked into my life who reminded me what it feels like to believe again, to hope again. He took a breath. I did not build this company alone, and I cannot continue leading it honestly if I do not acknowledge the person who helped me find my way back. He pointed gently toward Susan. Her name is Susan Carter, and whether you know it or not, she's the reason I remember why this place matters. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then, like rain breaking into sunlight, the boardroom filled with applause. Susan stood frozen at the threshold, eyes shimmering. Slowly she stepped forward. Liam met her halfway. He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and pulled out a small, dark box. He opened it. Inside was a silver key. "This," he said, his voice quiet but certain, "is not a gift, it is a responsibility." He placed the box in her hands. "It opens the office across from mine, the one with the sunniest window, the one marked Creative Director. Because that chair, Susan, that chair belongs to someone brave enough to sit in it." Her breath hitched. Her fingers curled around the box like it was made of glass. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Liam smiled. "Start with yes." She laughed softly, a tear slipping down her cheek. She looked around the room, at the faces now smiling, at the city beyond the glass, at the man who had once shared a meal with her in the rain. Then she reached out, took his hand and said, "And if you still haven't had lunch, I brought 2 boxes." A ripple of laughter passed through the boardroom. Liam's eyes sparkled. "Same recipe?" She nodded. "Extra sauce this time." He held her hand, firm and steady, and as the room faded, the camera of life pulling back, Susan's voice lingered in the air, soft, reflective, certain. "They say life is made of collisions. I think it begins with a canceled lunch order." Fade to black. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, then you belong here. At Soul Stirring Stories, we bring you true-to-the-heart tales of hope, healing, and the quiet power of love. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that might just stay with you forever. Because sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected moment to change everything. We'll see you in the next story.